The Gemara tells us that there's an argument whether there's an obligation to say Yitzis Mitzrayim, the third paragraph of the Shema, is only an obligation during the daytime or even at nighttime. It's an argument in Gemara Brachos. What's the argument? Because it says you should remember Mitzvah Kol Yimei Chayecha, all the days of your life. Doesn't mean to say, even if you said it in the morning, you must repeat it again at night, because the third paragraph of the Shema mentions Yitzis Mitzrayim. What does it mean? Kol Yimei Chayecha is referring to the Moshe Mashiach, that even after Mashiach comes, you're still going to mention Yitzis Mitzrayim. What's the question? That although the miracles, when Mashiach comes, the miracles of Egypt are going to pale compared to those miracles. For instance, the Gemara explains it with an allegory. A person meets a snake and he kills the snake, which he was saved miraculously. He was able to kill the snake. As he travels and he meets people, says, it just happened, I killed a snake. Then he's confronted with a bear. Bear attacks him, he kills the bear. He doesn't discuss any longer that he killed a snake. Of course, it's even a greater miracle that he survived the entanglement with the bear. After he kills the bear, what does it mean? He meets a lion. And he is able to kill the lion. Does he speak about the snake and the bear any longer? He only speaks about the lion. So you would think that since the miracles of Egypt pale to the miracles that are going to take place after Mashiach, maybe we shouldn't mention the Nisim of Mitzrayim. The Torah says, no, Kol Yimei Chayecha. That even after come Mashiach, when the miracles are going to overshadow whatever happened in Mitzrayim, you still have to mention Yitzis Mitzrayim. That's the Gemara in Brachos. That's the Kol Yimei Chayecha. Now, why, after Mashiach comes, why will we see the miracles so much greater? So seemingly there could be greater miracles. So it's hard to fathom. We discussed in the Haggadah also, Machlokes among the Tanoim, how many miracles transpired in the Kriyas Yamsuf? Was it 200? Was it 250 miracles? Could you imagine? It's not just the sea split. It's what happened at the time when it split. There were multiple 250 miracles. That's what happened after the splitting of the sea. And the miracles of after Moshe Mashiach are going to overshadow even Yitzis Mitzrayim, even Kriyas Yamsuf. I mean, we can't even relate to it. So you say, okay, we can't relate to a lot of things. It's a different dimension of miracle. So I was thinking, maybe what's going to happen when Mashiach comes? When Mashiach comes, all evil is going to be expunged. Why do we see things as clear as we have it, we still see things in a distorted context? The lens is not absolutely clear because we'll have a Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara doesn't allow us to have that absolute clarity. When Mashiach comes, all evil comes to an end. Hashem will purge this world from evil. We will no longer have free choice. We naturally will do good. And that's why it's called Yom Shem Chefetz. One gets no reward for the actions after Mashiach comes because there's no longer choice. There's no longer free choice. So it could be, if we would have that clarity, even when we saw the Mitzrayim, the miracles of Egypt, it would have been a different dimension of miracle. It's not necessarily the miracles that can happen after Mashiach comes are going to be greater miracles. It's the way we're going to experience the miracles. In Egypt, we had Yetzer Hara. Not only did we have Yetzer Hara, we still were the Mem Teshari Tumah. When we were in Egypt, we were there. So our spiritual systems were basically shut down. See, as much as we saw, we just saw the tip of the iceberg, even what we did see. And we did the trek to Sinai. Even when we were at Sinai, we still had the Yetzer Hara. We still had an evil inclination. As a result of that, the clarity was slightly occluded. We didn't fully grasp what was going on. When Mashiach comes, because there's no longer going to be the Yetzer Hara, we're not going to be subject to that interference, so to say. As a result of that, we're going to see things with absolute clarity. Once you see that with absolute clarity, even what happened in Egypt takes on a different dimension of understanding of what's going on. As a result of that, what we will see then, the miracles of Egypt will pale compared to what we're going to see Yemos Mashiach. although Sinai, although Yemos Mashiach will outpace it endless times over, but factually, we only arrived at Sinai, and we were worthy to have a relation with Hashem because of Sinai, and Sinai was only possible because there was Yitzis Mitzrayim. And the miracles of Yitzis Mitzrayim were a prerequisite to be able to be redeemed. So therefore, you never forget, even though in the actuality and the dimension it's less, but that was the foundation of everything. Right, Mark, that's what you're saying. We find we have three patriarchs, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Who is the greatest of all? Yaakov was the greatest of all the three. He fathered the 12 tribes. Yaakov is Ishtam Yoshim B'Olim. We're referred to as Bnei Yisrael, not Bnei Avraham. But yet, the Torah has to go out of its way to say, at the beginning of Lech Lecho, that although you may think that the first bracha in Shemon Esrei we should conclude Mogen Avram Yitzchak Yaakov, Hashem says V'yei bracha b'chol chosman. When Klal Yisrael will conclude the first bracha of the Amidah, it's Mogen Avram. It's not Mogen Avram Yitzchak Yaakov. Why? But Yaakov was greater. But Yaakov always greater was Yaakov because there was Avram. If Avram wouldn't have been the foundation, wouldn't have been the founding patriarch, even Yaakov could have never been Yaakov. As a result of that, it's no different. If not for Egypt, even though the miracles of Egypt pale to miracles that take place after Mashiach, but we would have never merited the Gula unless we were exposed to that level of Hashem's presence. Because we had Gula, we had Sinai. Because we had Sinai, now we have relevance to that level of relationship. And therefore, ultimately, we have Mashiach, and therefore, we have those miracles. Therefore, you can never forget what happened in Egypt, although it's less in terms of lesser level of magnification of Hashem than the miracles that take place at the time of Mashiach.
So, Rabbi, it sounds like
It says, look, at the end of time coming Mashiach, it's even really later. At time Mashiach, there's going to be a great eulogy. What's the eulogy? The Sultan, the Yetzer Hara. Hashem is going to slaughter the Yetzer Hara. Why? And it says that tzaddikim are going to be crying and the Rishon are going to be crying at this eulogy. So the tzaddikim, the Rishon are going to be crying because when they come to the level of understanding of reality, they said, how could this measly power, which is less than a hairbreadth, how did that control our lives? And we sold ourselves down the river for that measly nothing. And the tzaddikim, they see the Yetzer Hara like Mount Everest, like a Har Gavoa. How did we ever scale the mountain? And to be able to make right choices, despite now understanding what the Yetzer Hara was. So the question is, if that's the case, you should be ecstatic. You should have a level of joy. Why are you crying? So you'd say, why? One is tears of sorrow, of pain. The other is tears of joy. However, the Maharsha says, no, that's not. Even the tzaddikim are crying because they're pained. What are they pained about? David Mel says, the Gemara in Brochus and Sukkah cite this, that if not for Hashem's intervention, it's impossible to contend with the Yetzer Hara. Impossible. He can outwit us, outsmart us, run rings around us, and hoodwink us, that he could convince you that day is night, night is day. It's only because Hashem doesn't allow it, and there's always special divine intervention for the tzaddik. That's what the tzaddik's able to maintain himself. However, we learn it, we know it, but until we see it in real time, we believe it's our initiative. We've made the choice. At the end of the time, we're going to come to realization. When we see what the Yetzer Hara is, that is the equivalent of Mount Everest, regardless of what we are, it is an impossibility. So we took credit all the years, believing that it's us, and it's not Hashem, we're embarrassed. And now, because now we come to realization, what we believe to be us, we're embarrassed, it's Hashem, and we never appreciated it, it's Hashem and not us. So both are tears of pain. We were disappointed with ourselves and embarrassed. How could we see it so wrong? That's how the Maharsha learns. What is the objective of free choice, of choice? Because the only reason why we do the action is because of our own initiative. That's the reason. As a result of that, we're accredited for the action because if not for our initiative, it wouldn't happen in both directions, positive and negative. Now, a person has the ability to lift 500 pounds, and you ask him to lift something which weighs 1 pound. Is that a challenge? It's not a challenge. But if you give a person who's just come out, is going into rehab, who just had a stroke, and you ask him to lift his hand, even lifting his hand is a challenge. Definitely lifting even a weight which weighs a pound is a challenge. But for the person who has that unlimited level of strength, it means nothing. The Russia, because he himself chose to lead a life which has no relevance to spirituality, and he's made many bad choices. For him, the Gemara says in Shabbos, it says, if you want to contaminate your neshama, sin, they just open the door and just walk up the gangplank. If you want to purify yourself, you merit divine assistance. You want to scale a wall which is vertically straight up 10,000 feet. It's an impossibility. Somebody has to throw you that rope, you hold on to it, and they pull you up. Otherwise, you can't do it. So that's habol letar misayno. So habol letame, you want to contaminate yourself? Hashem says the door's wide open. You're free to do whatever you want. Hashem doesn't even push you. The temptation is there, and the person goes through the temptation. So to contend with that, what is drawing him? What he believes to be? To be able, we have a mountain on you, and the only way you're able to get to the destination, you have to pick up the mountain. You can't pick up the mountain. But if you really want to do it, that's the tzaddik, to do the will of Hashem no matter what, Hashem gives you that divine assistance. That's Messiah knows so. So as the person advances spiritually, that at every step of the way for the rest of your life, you live till 100 years old, and the majority of your actions are positive, and you're always advancing spiritually. If the Yetzer Hara wouldn't actually intensify, there's no challenge any longer. So as we advance, the Yetzer Hara intensifies, keeps growing. And because we have that commitment and we want to achieve what we want to achieve, Hashem gives us the ability to be able to, he removes that and gives us the ability to meet that challenge. But the challenge keeps, the Yetzer Hara becomes more intense and larger and stronger at every level of the way. But we don't realize it because we're at that level. Today, it's not a person's a welterweight, featherweight, welterweight, heavyweight. When he was a welterweight, he couldn't stand up against this guy. He worked out. He built his body. He has that experience. Now we can take on the heavyweight. That's what the tzaddik believes. But it's only because once he becomes a heavyweight, his opponent is no longer the welterweight, because the welterweight, it's not a challenge. He blows him over. So for the tzaddik to be able to be accredited for that initiative, God, Hashem keeps increasing the challenge so the Yetzer Hara keeps growing. But the tzaddik doesn't realize it because the tzaddik becomes a greater tzaddik. But at that level, the lesser challenge is no longer a challenge. But to be accredited and to have that value, the challenge has to be always upped to give the tzaddik that he should be the greatest beneficiary of his choice. That's the concept. Therefore, when at the end of time, when the tzaddik is going to see the Yetzer Hara, it's going to be like a mountain, like Mount Everest. But he doesn't realize it until then. Therefore, he cries out of shame that he took credit for his achievements. He attributed to himself, not to Hashem. Therefore, the tears are tears of pain, as the Russia has tears of pain, why he forfeited his life for whatever, for the choices that he had made. We read about the HaMoshiach, that after the sea closed on the Egyptians, Moshe said the song of the sea, HaMoshiach. And the Gemara tells us that first Moshe said a few words, the Jews repeated after him. And we said it when he said it, we in unison followed. And that's the way it was said. Now, we're talking about 250 miracles happened at Kriyas Yamsuf. To be able, normally, to be able to evaluate something and to do an analysis of something, you really have to have a certain expertise. What this maidservant saw, Yecheskel Novi didn't see. Do you think what the maidservant saw, you think Moshe, Aaron HaKohen, you think they saw the same thing? We're saying even the maidservant at her lowly level, what she saw was greater than Yecheskel. But somebody was more than a maidservant. Although they saw the same thing as the maidservant, what they saw and what they understood was at a different dimension. And based on the capacity of each person, they saw it at another level. But they were all seeing the same thing. But it was based on their capacity. To that degree, that's the way they saw it. Now, who saw it at that ultimate level, understood every nuance and detail of the 250 miracles that took place at Kriyas Yamsuf? Moshe Rabbeinu. So to HaMoshiach, Moshe had to articulate every aspect, every nuance of what took place at Kriyas Yamsuf. We say HaMoshiach, within those words is included the 250 miracles. He's articulating, giving praise to Hashem for what he did at Kriyas Yamsuf. If you read it, could you see in those words 250 miracles? We can't. But in the words, embedded in those words, we're alluding to 250 miracles that took place at Kriyas Yamsuf. Therefore, Moshe himself, being the expert, having the greatest capacity, he says, I will say it, you will repeat after me. Because as a result of that, the words, the praises that Klal Yisrael had said, included with them, was embedded in those words, the 250 miracles, giving thanks. Rav Chaim Volozhiner, we had in Nefesh Chaim, we mentioned this, that the Gemara says in Yuma that when the Jews came back after 70 years in Godless Bovel, the Anshe Knesset Gedolah, they authored the Amidah, the Shemona Esrei. And the Gemara tells us that among the Anshe Knesset Gedolah, Kamen Neviim Hoyu Beineim, there are a number of prophets among them who were part of that body who authored the text for the Shemona Esrei, for the Amidah. So Chaim Volozhin asks, who that was Chagi Zachari Malachi. Chagi Zachari Malachi were the last Nevi'im. They were the Nevi'im Achronim, the last Nevi'im. After them, there was no longer prophecy. They were part of this body who actually chose the words and made the decision how it should be expressed. So Chaim Volozhin asks, what do we need Nevi'im? Anshe Knesset Gedolah should have been sufficient. What are the prophets? So Chaim Volozhin explains, a prophet understands all the inner workings of existence because he has that connection with Hashem. The Rambam writes that a prophet who prophesies even for a moment, after he has that prophecy, he's a different human being. Because prophecy means even a prophet who prophesies in the sleep state, when Hashem attaches himself to his neshama, that experience, there's no experience in existence that is the equivalent of that experience. You become a different human being. Literally a different human being. That's what prophecy is. So he says, the Nevi'im, Chag Zachai Malachi, being prophets, they had an understanding of the inner workings of existence. So when they saw existence and they understood how do you resolve a problem or what is a problem, they understood it to the very source and they were able to trace the problem back to the source. Because they had that understanding, because they were prophets, how the physical world mirrors the spiritual world in the positive and the negative, why we fail, why things advance. They had that understanding. So the words they chose in the Amidah address every conceivable problem that we ever have to confront with till the end of existence, till Bias Mashiach. So when we say those words, although we don't understand, we understand the words at a certain level, but what's embedded in those words touch everything, every conceivable necessity to address every issue that Klal Yisrael will ever have to be confronted with till the end of time. So Rav Chaim Volozhin says, when you say those words, although we don't have an understanding of the breadth and depth of the words, but because he said a word which contains that, it has that thrust, it brings about the same result. Although we don't understand the extent of what that is. This is Rechaim Veloshis. I always give the example in those days. Today it's a whole different world. You know, we under the ocean, you have Trident missiles, and a person has a keyboard, and it doesn't realize that keyboard, if you punch in a certain code, you activate those Trident missiles, and they're aimed at cities. And the person thinks he's just typing on a typewriter here, or a keyboard, and he hits a few numbers. He doesn't realize every time he hits that number, it launches a Trident missiles, and it destroys a city that has 20 million people. Does he have an understanding? He thinks he's just touching a button there. But that button activates that force. Identically, Shmon Esrei, Kamen Devim Ho'ibinei, because the Nevi'im, they were part of the body who authored those words and chose the words. Those words contain or embedded them, and activates forces that we can't even relate to. That's Reb Chaim Velosh Nefesh HaChaim. So he says, even if you have a simple understanding, when you enter into the Amida, and you understand you're having an audience with Hashem, and you have the humility, and you meet certain basic criteria, the value of that Amida is no less than he says if you have Kavonas Arizal. Even if you have the Kavonas Arizal, the value is no less than that. And even Kavonas Arizal, he says, it's a drop in the ocean compared to what actually is contained within those words. Just quoting Reb Chaim Veloshna. So I'm saying what Moshe Rabbeinu said to Ozi Yoshir, what happened at the Yam Suf, nobody understood it the way Moshe Rabbeinu understood it. Moshe Rabbeinu, he's the Goel, Shem Hashem Mundat, he understood Yud Kei Vav Kei, he understood everything, Moshe Rabbeinu, because Hashem revealed it to him. So when he saw what transpired at the Yam Suf, to be able to articulate it and choose the right words, he chose those words. And that was the praise. We repeated after him. We were repeating, did we understand what was contained within those words? No. But saying those words, we're giving that same praise to Hashem. Understand we're beneficiaries of whatever is contained within those words. V'yidaber Hashem al Moshe Lemor, daber al bnei Yisrael, v'yashuvu v'yachnu v'nei pi achiros. Speak to Bnei Yisrael and let them return and camp before pi achiros. Bein Migdol vein Hayom. Where's it located? Between Migdol and the sea. Lifnei Baal Tzafon. Now this is important. Before Baal Tzafon, Nichacho Sachnu Alayom. Before Baal Tzafon, that's the Lord of the North. That's where that's where they should camp by the sea. So Rashi is going to see to explain in a moment based on the Medrash. It says, Uvelehem Mitzrayim Esesh Shvotim. And we had this last week's parsha. Every one of the deities of Egypt, how was it represented? You had idols. Idols were made of wood, they were made of stone, they were made of gold, silver. What happened to the idols that were made of gold and silver or metal? They melted. The idol that was made of plaster or stone just cracked and was just turned to dust. The idols that were made of wood rotted, because that's the idol is only representation of that deity. When a person worships the idol, he's not worshiping the stone and the gold. That's a representation of what that represents, the deity. He destroyed every one of those deities, were destroyed, and they came and they realized it. However, Hashem left one deity, the Baal Tzafon. Why did Hashem leave the Baal Tzafon? Because again, this was a smokescreen for them, that they should believe that Hashem is not the Almighty, but rather he's mighty, but he's not almighty. Because if he be almighty, as he destroyed all the other deities, why did he destroy Baal Tzafon, the Lord of the North? So evidently, the Lord of the North is one of the deities of Egypt. So therefore, Paro believed, again, as I said, when it says Hashem hardened his heart, it doesn't say that he was demented. It means that although he should have seen more clearly, he saw it irrationally. If God didn't destroy Baal Tzafon, that means he's not in control, fully in control, rather than seeing it as a ploy to draw him into it. But that's the Baal Tzafon. That's why Hashem did not destroy the Baal Tzafon, and we're traveling the desert, we're going the opposite direction that he should believe that we're here, we're locked in the desert, because the Baal Zephon, representing Egypt, is holding on to us. And the God of the Jews cannot release us from that hold. Okay? Let's see Rashi. Vayashuvu lachoreim litzad Mitzrayim. The third day that they were out, they were traveling, getting closer to Egypt. Gidei lahatos is Paro, to mislead Paro. Sheyoma tomehim b'derech. They're totally wandering. They're lost on the way. What is this piachiros? He piso. He spoke piso and Ramses. V'achshav nikra picharos. Now it's called pichiro from the word cheros. Al shem shenasu sham b'nei choren. V'hem shnei sloim gevoim zekufim. Two large stones which are vertical. The guy shebeneim kori piasloim, and the valley between these two like mountains are called piasloim. Lifnei Baal Zephon, who nisha mikol elhei Mitzrayim. This was the only deity which Hashem left of all the deities of Egypt. Kedei latosam, to mislead them. Sheyomru koshi yerosam, that this deity is what is powerful. V'olav pirsh Eov mashki lagoyim v'yavdem. God misleads the goyim only to destroy them, meaning he gives them enough rope to hang themselves. He'll lead them to that edge, and then they go off the edge. Because that's the path they chose. Paro said about the Bnei Yisrael, they're locked into the land. They're stranded. The desert closed in on them. So once he sees that, the chizakti is like Paro. He says, I will strengthen his heart. You understand? Any rational person, if you lost 10 out of 10, you lost. Egypt behind you was rubble. Nothing's left. The only thing that's left, you realize they fled. Going after the Jews could be the most serious mistake of in history. Of course, if you lost 10 out of 10, you lose this one, it's all over. Egypt is history, never ever to recover. So for that, you need chizaktis like Paro, because any rational person would say, you know something, as painful as it is, I'm not going to take that chance. It's like 1 in a million, you're going to survive this one. Who goes there? You don't go. Chizaktis like Paro. I will strengthen his heart, and he will go, and he will rely on that irrational. He'll be irrational. V'rada v'achrein. He will pursue them because of that hardening of the heart. V'kovda b'faro chochelo, and I will be glorified. Hashem says, I'll be glorified through Paro and all his armies. V'yodem mitzrayim kid Hashem, and then when they will be destroyed, Egypt will know that Ani Hashem, because until now, there's this certain blind spot. 3 days will let you go. If you understand who the Jews are and who the God is, you say, of course you could go. What's the question? They should embrace Hashem when I will be glorified, because here they feel empowered because I strengthened his heart and he will pursue us with his armies, the cavalry, the chariot, all of them. Then Mitzrayim will know I am Hashem. They also came. They did it. The Jews traveled back towards the enemy. It's like going back into the lion's mouth. But because they had such faith in Hashem of what they were experiencing at the time, they felt they were under Hashem's protection. There's nothing to worry about. So the Jews started traveling the opposite direction. Now, Vayugad Lamelch Mitzrayim Kivorach Ha'om. It was told to Paro, the people had fled. Now, what does this mean? So there's a famous Orach HaKodesh over here. We find over here, there's a continuous change, and Yisrael. Paro sent out the Erev Rav, the rabble. How much rabble did he send out? A handful of them. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of Egyptians were sent with the Jews. Why? What's the reason? So Rachaim HaKodesh explains that Paro suspected very strongly that after 3 days they're not coming back. So as a result of that, he told them this: if the Jews don't come back after 3 days and I lose hold of them, you people are going to assume the responsibilities, physical work of the Jews. And you're going to become slaves. You're going to make the mortar and brick. So he felt by telling that, you know what happens? Guaranteed they're not going to let the Jews continue. They're going to stop them in their tracks. That was the value of sending out hundreds of thousands of Egyptians, which was the Erev Rav with the Jews. What happened? We'll see in a moment. Once the Egyptians understood this, that the Jews, there's no way to stop them. So what's the alternative now? Go back. They said, you know something? We're joining the pack. We're not going back. So not only did Paro lose the Jews by sending them out, he lost these hundreds of thousands of Egyptians who would have been, again, the new backbone for his economy. Even that he lost. It was told to Paro that even the rabble fled. The rabble are not coming back. They were sent for that purpose, to stop the Jews, that they can't go beyond the 3-day limit. And now we hear is not only couldn't they stop them, they joined them. Paro had a change of heart. Because of the people. Yeah. What would we do? How do we act so foolishly? We thought we could send the Jews out Me'avdeinu because at least we had the guarantee the rabble would bring them back. And even if they don't bring them back, we have the rabble to assume their position as slaves. But now that we even lost the rabble, it was a mistake even to let the Jews go out, because now we're left with nothing. This is how the Orach Chaim explains the pasuk. You know, many years ago, whether it's Russia or certain countries in the Middle East, a Jew was only allowed to leave if he'd leave his family behind. Because if he left his family, that means he's coming back. He's not leaving for good. That was the guarantee. So this tactic about doing certain things to guarantee because you don't trust, you're concerned he may leave, he's saying he's going on a trip and he's fleeing. So some of them, they did leave their families behind. But many of them came back because they weren't going to leave their wives and children behind. Paro had the same approach. You Egyptians, the Jews are going to come back. If they don't, to guarantee they do, you people are going to become my slaves. And you'll be treated exactly as the Jews were treated. When they realize that the going is going to get really tough, they say, you know something? Forget about our families, forget our children. If we're going to go back and be slaves, it's not worth living. If that's the case, we're out of here. The Yesor es Richbo, here the Torah tells us, he harnessed his own chariot, and he took his people with him. Now, who ever heard of a king harnessing his own chariot? I mean, Paro still had servants and slaves. He had harnessed his own chariot. Just how do we understand this? Well, definitely, at this moment, he was desperate. What did Moshe say to Paro before the plague of the Arbe? Ad Moshe me'ato leonos biponai. To what point do you refuse to humble yourself before me, to submit before me? We already had, it was after the 7th plague, the Borod. Egypt is rubble. So Moshe says, in the name of Hashem, what does it take for you to humble you? Why are you refusing to be humbled? Paro is not willing to come off his high horse because he believed that since the wheat crop, the spelt crop wasn't destroyed, he's still in a secure position. Because the staple of wheat and spelt was there. So he says, but after all you've seen, how do you not come off your high horse and see clearly and understand and submit to the God of the Jews? At this point, The 10th plague happened. The Jews are not coming back. The Egyptians are not coming back. Paro knows now. Unless he wakes up. If he doesn't wake up now, he's not waking up any longer. So the whole idea, it's beneath my dignity, or I'm the king, it's all irrelevant now. Whatever it takes to get the Jews back, he's going for it. But what about my persona as king? I'm a deity. It all means nothing. Because if he doesn't get them back now, he's history. Not only in disgrace, there won't even be a trace of his memory. Therefore, v'yeses richbo. This has nothing to do with Asinima Kalkel, says Ashura. By Bilam, it was Asinima. It says he hitched his own donkey. There had to do with the hate. He was so rabid against the Jews. Without overall protocol. By Paro, it's not override protocol. Here, it's the only reason why it's beneath his dignity. How does he do? He's this. At this point, you understand, unless you do this, you're nothing. So now it's now or never. Therefore, he hitches his own donkey, his own chariot, to what? To go after the Jews.